Zoraida tells Pandora and Lilith that they need to go, and that she's particularly fond of this departure. There's a knock on the door, and she answers it to find a man holding a box and a note. He tells her that he was told to deliver it here, and he would be able to keep his job. She opens the box and takes out a pistol, and then kicks the door open. As the man sees the pile of bodies, she shoots Lilith, then Pandora, and then smiles at the man and shoots herself. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and I'm pretty excited because it's finally time to talk about Zoraida from the Neverborn and the Bayou. We're going to be breaking down all of her stories, so this is your spoiler warning for everything Zoraida's ever appeared in. And you can find a list of those stories in the description, so you can have a look for yourself. This video took a lot of work to put together, so I'd appreciate it if you give me a like, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And if you want to chat about Zoraida further, then head over to the Discord. Also, if you really like what I'm doing and you want to support the channel, then check out the Patreon, where you can get some of the videos early, ad-free, and a bunch of other perks, including shoutouts in the videos. But with that, let's talk about Zoraida. Jeremiah walks through the bayou, carrying a stick with blood on the end. He had been told that if he places the stick in the bayou water, the bloody side will automatically turn away from the heart of the bayou, as it knows to avoid that place. The other side will point in the direction he wants to go. As he trudges deeper into the stagnant water, he remembers that he was also told that when he meets her, he would have one chance to play a hand of Bayou 2 card. If he wins, he would get what he wanted. As he continues, he notices that all of the sounds of the bayou suddenly die out. He places the stick in the water again, and is suddenly startled by the sound of a croaking toad, and loses the stick. As he scrambles to try to find it, he hears a voice asking him if he came to play a game. He turns to see an ugly woman, and suddenly realizes that he's at the entrance of a rickety shack. The woman sits at a table, and then pushes a deck of cards across to him, so he picks them up and begins shuffling. She asks if he knows the game, as she deals him 2 cards. He confirms that he does, so she tells him to ante up. He puts down a coin, and she does the same, and then she flips a card, the Queen of Masks. He notices that the art on the card looks just like the witch. He keeps a stoic face, though it's a good card for him, and she flips another card, the Jack of Tomes. She tells him that this is him. The Jack of Tomes is an industrious man, and he has come to see her. The Jack of Tomes covets the treasure of the court, and he covets that fancy girl. Jeremiah wonders how she knows why he has come, but she flips another card, the 3 of Crows, the Death of Love. She asks if he wants to play on, and he has 2 pairs, so he says he'll call. She flips another card, the Jack of Masks, the Shepherd of all fears. He realizes that he now has a full house, which seems unbeatable, but he knows he needs to stay calm so he doesn't spook her into folding. She flips another card, the 7 of Rams, for a difficult choice to make. Now that the game is over, they need to finalize their bets, so the witch lifts her hat and takes out a piece of balled up paper and throws it in the pot. He does covet a fancy girl and desires to be wealthy enough to court her. She could grant him this wish if he wins. He also takes out a balled up piece of paper and places it in the pot. He flips his cards and declares that he has a full house, jacks over queens. There's silence and a long pause before she slowly flips over 2 queens. She has a full house as well, queens over jacks. She smiles at him and unfolds his piece of paper, on which he has written that he pledges to her to grant whatever she desires. He asks what she wants, and she says his spleen. He then asks if he doesn't need that to live, and she answers that she doesn't know because no one has ever survived the taking. Many superstitious people believe that Zoraida is synonymous with the evil eye, someone who reads the fate of others and destroys it as well. She lives in the bayou on the outskirts of the city among terrible creatures, and she has some purpose that most people don't dwell on for fear of catching her attention. Occasionally, people will venture into the bayou, seeking fortune or trying to get a glimpse at their futures. No creature in Malifaux understands fate better than Zoraida. She is present where destiny dictates, at all events of great importance, and her complex designs stretch far and wide, manipulating people and events like a puppeteer. When the hair on the back of a person's neck prickles, and a chill runs down their spine, it's attributed to the hag's gaze. She's out there, and she's watching. After sending a letter Earthside to summon a mercenary named Victoria, Zoraida heads to the Qiangong to meet the woman. She waits in a private room, and soon a woman walks in and asks if she is Z. Zoraida confirms, introducing herself, and asks if she is her contractor. Victoria asks what the job is, and Zoraida pulls out a deck of cards, shuffles them, and then flips one off the top, the Lord of Winter. Zoraida says that this is the creature. Victoria doesn't understand, so Zoraida explains that he is not a man but a creature, who has murdered and done far worse, and lives without consequences. His name is December. Victoria asks for his description, and Zoraida says that she'll tell her what she needs to know, but that these cards can see fate, and that gives them an opportunity to change it. Victoria is skeptical, but remembers how she received the letter, so she decides to stay. Zoraida deals a 7 of Tomes above the first card, and explains that this is her ambition. She has gathered pieces of legends, but Victoria wants to become a legend herself. Victoria replies that she was told there would be soulstones in payment, and that is what brought her here. Zoraida flips another card, and places it below the Lord of Winter, the Queen of Crows. She represents the comfort of death. She shows mercy by giving a quick death and feels no sorrow for the dead. Victoria decides that some of this rings true and asks Zoraida to go on. The old woman deals the Ace of Rams to the left and says that this represents Victoria's past. It symbolizes what she will use to defeat her enemy, a weapon. Victoria touches her blade, the Masamune, which is said to be the most powerful blade ever forged. Zoraida deals the Two of Masks to the right, forming a cross with the cards. She says that this is a mirror, and it represents a confrontation with herself. The confrontation can come in different forms, but out of it, Victoria will find an ally. She flips another card and places it over the Lord of Winter, the Three of Masks. Zoraida laughs and says that Victoria will be opposed by the three sisters, who will work with her or against her, but will hinder her efforts. Victoria says that she works alone, no allies, and that conspiracies don't bother her. Zoraida then hands her another card, the Ace of Tomes, and Victoria asks her what this one means. Zoraida replies that it is the locked book and represents her reward at the end of her quest. Even Zoraida doesn't know what it will be. She then fetches a chest and opens it to reveal 3 soulstones and a map. After she lays out the map, Victoria sees that it is a map of the city, and there's a black mark far to the east. Zoraida points to it and says to go there, and she will meet December. She gives the woman a soulstone and says that when he is defeated, she'll receive the other 2 as her reward. As the events at Kythera transpire, Pandora, Lilith, and Zoraida watch from inside of Zoraida's hut. Pandora asks what they can do if the humans are able to create machines like Ramos's Leviathan. Lilith responds that if they can make tools of the humans, then the humans' tools become theirs as well. Zoraida agrees and praises the other women for their roles in orchestrating the events that took place, including Pandora proving that the Masamune is as powerful as they suspected, and Lilith for ensuring that Rasputina met Ramos. She says that everything went according to plan, with the exception of one thing. She turns her looking glass on Seamus and Molly, who is holding the Gorgon's tear, and explains that the Gorgon went unnoticed by her, and she may have succeeded in her plan if it weren't for Ramos's Leviathan. Lilith turns the looking glass on the Victorias, and mentions that the woman will soon find out that she's being manipulated. Zoraida tells her that they need to wait, as patience is what won them the day. They managed to stop December and close the portal at Kythera, and now they need to take their time and watch what the humans will do next. As the huge surge of energy from the event drains from Zoraida's body, she goes inside her hut and fetches a deck of cards. Hoping to divine the future, she flips a card, the Two of Tomes. 2 books will be needed to find the answer. The next card, the Queen of Rams, a female warrior. The next card, the Black Joker, which represents death. And another, the 10 of Crows, the necropolis beneath Malifaux City. She flips more cards, but they don't make much sense and seem to contradict each other. So Zoraida focuses on the female warrior who will die, and then find power in the necropolis. She knows it will come true, as she continues searching for how the Neverborn will interact with destiny. Months after the event, Zoraida stands in the bayou, thinking about how December almost came back to power, and that the other tyrants are stirring, and how she regrets her role in all of it. She considers that when she was young, she had the optimism and spirit to face these kinds of problems, and suddenly she has a revelation. She draws on the leftover power from the event, like one might call on the power of a soulstone, but instead of focusing the energy into a spell, she focuses it into herself. Her body begins to straighten, and her skin grows smooth as her hair returns to its raven black color. Her new, younger form levitates above the bayou, and Zoraida understands what has to be done, but that it would require the sacrifice of many, a price she could accept. After having a strange encounter with the riders under the hanging tree, Leveticus dies, and his spectral form ends up in the bayou. He sees a young woman, clearly not Zoraida, and notices that she's almost naked. He says that even in death he has time to admire a beauty like this, thinking that he can't be heard. To his surprise, the woman looks at him and says, "You haven't changed a bit, old man." He asks who she is, and she laughs, as Leveticus realizes that this is Zoraida. She tells him that the hooded rider told her he would come. Leveticus asks why this is happening, and Zoraida smiles, remarking that it is now Leveticus who comes to her for answers. She adds that she's surprised he doesn't recognize her, since this is how he should remember her, from when he found her long ago. He says he doesn't remember, and Zoraida tells him that he's lying, going on to explain that she believes she is meant to teach him what she has learned, though she doesn't understand what his role is yet. Leveticus says that the riders told him he would lead them to punish those responsible for the imbalance. Zoraida says maybe that's the case, but she doesn't think they can stop them willingly. She adds that it's funny that they all still believe in free will, since their every action is controlled by fate. Leveticus asks what she's supposed to teach him, as the riders approach from out of the swamp. Zoraida says she doesn't know what she's meant to teach, but she intends to learn how to stop a tyrant. Leveticus says that he didn't think that was possible, as she had tried to do it with the girl with the sword and December, but it seems to have only pissed him off. Zoraida clarifies that she wants to stop them, but she no longer thinks that they can be killed in the way that they think of death. She points out that they are a lot like him. Leveticus gets defensive and asks how she means, and Zoraida explains that they are not physical entities, just like Leveticus, though they can take physical form. They draw power from the ether and from people, just like people do with soulstones. She wonders if what happened to this world was that the tyrants devoured it spirit by spirit. As the realization dawns on her, she tells Leveticus that, like humans, they feed off of the power without regard for their actions. She explains that the ether is the greatest source of power, and the tyrants mean to use it to ascend. But they can learn to use it as well, just like they harness the power of soulstones. They might even learn to leech the power from the tyrants themselves. Leveticus asks if she thinks they can really do that, and Zoraida motions to her new body. He then asks why she made herself young, and she explains that she needed to revert to a time when she had different mastery over the fates. She didn't explicitly intend to get younger. He asks what they do next, after learning to harness the power and teaching the others to fight the tyrants. Zoraida says that she doesn't know, but they can start by learning to manifest the power and become something greater. Leveticus then asks what's in it for her, as she's always plotting something, and Zoraida replies, yes, always something. After the event happened, infusing all of the magic users of Malifaux with powerful new abilities, Leveticus and Zoraida spend their time sparring to sharpen their abilities for an eventual battle against the tyrants. Zoraida sits down to take a break, commenting that she may be young now, but her endurance is not infinite. Leveticus is about to respond, but he feels a pain in his head, and he knows that a vision is coming to him, as it has already twice before. He sees himself mounted on a steed, with 4 other riders behind him. They're under attack, and explosions go off around him, as the riders spread out, and they get close to their enemy's line. He can't see who the enemy is, and as they close in, the vision fades, and he's standing before Zoraida again. He tells her everything he saw in the vision, and Zoraida's only response is, "Where was I?" Lilith walks through the bayou on her way to Zoraida's hut while thinking about current events, and she suddenly realizes that she's fallen victim to Zoraida's deception and wandered past the hut. She doubles back to find the swamp hag sitting outside her hut, and the woman cackles and then asks her if she got lost. Lilith sees a crow sitting behind Zoraida and instantly swaps places with it and replies, "Not at all." This startles Zoraida, but then she laughs again. Lilith mentions that the cold seems to have come early this year, and she asks Zoraida if the creatures of the bayou will survive. Zoraida responds that the gremlins will have the hardest time, and Lilith comments that that's a shame, as the humans will barely notice, as they are huddled inside of Malifaux City. She asks the witch if the humans will even know about December. Zoraida considers that while she doesn't have to worry about humans stumbling upon her hut, December and the other tyrants are different, and they pose a real threat. As she thinks, Lilith adds that a dead rider has emerged from the necropolis. Zoraida tells her that that's not the first rider to emerge, as a hooded rider came to her before the event. Lilith is surprised, as it was foretold that the hooded rider would come to the Neverborn, and Zoraida adds that she is not Neverborn. Lilith tells her that she might as well be, as she is in spirit, if not in blood. Zoraida explains that she doesn't know why the hooded rider has come, as she couldn't understand what it said to her, but that she knows it was let out of the necropolis at the same time that Plague was set free. And she scolds Lilith, saying that they didn't secure the necropolis well enough. Lilith gets defensive, telling her that she agreed it was secured well enough, using the same magic that protects Zoraida's hut. Zoraida responds that no human could have walked to the necropolis, even by accident, but that Hamlin had fallen in. She adds that man did not bring this about, but fate did. Lilith tells her that man meddles with fate haphazardly, and asks Zoraida if she thinks it was a mistake for the witch to have reopened the breach. Zoraida says that it's unclear, but that if the humans can learn to trust their instincts, they might be able to change all of this. Lilith adds that they also might bring about the end. She points out that December and Plague were able to rise because of the humans, and that the Resurrectionists almost brought back the Grave Spirit. Zoraida dismisses this, explaining that Plague didn't know what he was doing, and underestimated the other tyrants' abilities to keep him from ascending, and that the Resurrectionists don't understand the power that they have at their fingertips. Lilith counters that Plague may have been stopped, but the other tyrants still meddle with the humans, and that the red cage has opened and let out its captive. Zoraida adds that it may have already chosen a host, and Lilith is surprised when Zoraida doesn't know who that might be. Lilith tells her that the sacrifice of Jackdaw was meant to keep the tyrants at bay, but that it may have backfired and brought them about even sooner. Zoraida tells her that the tyrants were coming back no matter what, and that if they hadn't done what they did, the Neverborn would have faced them alone. At least now they may have powerful allies to help them stand against the tyrants. Lilith asks where Pandora is, and Zoraida explains that she is off dealing with Candy, who had grown up too fast as a result of the event, and has become impetuous. She explains that Candy likes to torment the humans, comparing her to Nekima, adding that this is a problem because they need the humans strong, not broken. Lilith winces at the mention of her sister, and then adds that it might be time to make another sacrifice like Jackdaw, and recommends the Governor General as a good candidate. Zoraida tells her that the Governor General has a lust for power, but that he does not believe in the value of sacrifice. Lilith then recommends that they reach out to Nightmare, and Zoraida responds that Nightmare is also planning his own ascension, and that they should confront him. Lilith tells her that Nightmare will not respect Zoraida as a Neverborn, but that Pandora would be a good candidate to speak with him, since they both deal with the psychological. As she leaves to go find Pandora, Lilith asks Zoraida if she will see her again. Zoraida responds that she's still got years left, and Lilith tells her that it might as well be seconds, as it feels like they just met. Adulio had used his last coin to buy a bracelet from Lupita because he felt bad when he noticed that she wasn't selling any. Zoraida asks him for the pledge, and he's reluctant, but he takes the bracelet off, as the witch assures him that he'll get it back. She throws it in the cauldron that's been stewing, and then slashes his hand with a knife and lets the blood drip in the cauldron as well. The wind blows and the hut creaks, as Adulio questions his sanity for coming and seeking out the witch. It had been an ordeal to get here, but when he told her his desperate tale of love for the beautiful Lupita, Zoraida had nodded and invited him inside. She ties a bandage around his hand and tells him that he's strong, and that the bond will be strong as well. He asks her if it's done, and she tells him that she's given him what he's asked for. She takes the bracelet out of the cauldron, and it's shriveled and blackened, but she ties it around his wrist anyway. He looks at his wounded hand, and Zoraida asks him if the price that he paid was not worth it. He says that he would have given his whole hand, and tells her that he'll go to Lupita tomorrow and tell her how he feels. Zoraida takes his injured hand and tells him that it is the bond, and that the two of them are bound together now. Death awaits any man who should try to take her from him. He was so excited thinking about his future that he missed the devious look on the witch's face. Had he thought it through better, he would have been more specific about his request, but he was most afraid that someone would take her away from him, so he asked her to make sure that Lupita would be for him and him alone. Ermine Follow, a guild bureaucrat, comes to Lupita's flower stand and fawns over her. The woman is repelled but stays pleasant, and tries to sell him some flowers, knowing that he never buys in spite of his great wealth. He tells her that he can take her away from this life, and she politely refuses and tells him she makes a living and is content. She tries to look for a way out of the conversation, but the man persists. Suddenly, he recoils and grabs his face as a yellow jacket flies away. He howls in pain from the sting on his face, and Lupita lets out a giggle. This enrages the man, and he curses her for laughing, and promises she'll regret it as he hurries away. An hour later, Adulio approaches, after cleaning himself up and taking off his bandage. He was surprised to find that the injury was gone. When he arrives, he finds that Lupita's stall is turned over and there's flowers scattered everywhere. He asks another one of the vendors, and they tell him that she was taken by the guild. They claim that she had assaulted an officer. He feels the bracelet on his wrist start to burn, and the woman explains that it must have been a guild official who was always trying to pick her up. She tells him that the man's name is Follow. Adulio tracks the man down to his office and asks to speak with him. He doesn't wait for an invitation and barges into the office and tells the man that they must speak and it can't wait. Follop says that he has 1 minute, and he explains that it's about Lupita. Follop asks if he is her brother, but he corrects that he is with her. The man says that she never mentioned him, and he doesn't seem like her type, and Adulio looks at his swollen face and asks if Lupita did that to him. Follop says he was assaulted, and the man tells him that he's lying, as the people in the square say he was making inappropriate advances. At that, Follop stands up and cuts the man off, calling for his guards, as Adulio demands to know where they've taken her. The guards rush in and try to remove him, but he pushes against them, trying to get to Follop. He momentarily breaks free and grabs the officer by the throat, demanding that he let Lupita go, as she is his. They struggle to get him off, but to no avail, and soon another guard comes in and uses his saber to cut the man's hand off at the wrist. As the guards drag him away, the hand is still wrapped around Follop's neck, and it tightens its grip. It takes a great deal of effort from the rest of the guards to pry it off. Follop spends the rest of the day struggling to breathe or eat. He has nightmares about a hand choking him, and when he gets up, he feels like the hand is still there, squeezing even harder. He goes to the doctor, who offers him some medicine, but it has no effect. As he starts to get desperate, he remembers the boy demanding to be reunited with Lupita. He decides to go back to the jail and set them both free, and apologize, hoping that whatever curse has been inflicted on him will be lifted. He stumbles into the jail, wheezing, and asks the jailer where the boy is. The jailer tells him that he's dead. They had thrown him in the cell, but he only lasted an hour. They had refused to tend to his wounds, as he didn't deserve the help after what he did. Follop realizes that there's no way to lift this curse, and it's over for him. To most people, Zoraida is the swamp hag, who desperate people seek out to try to gamble with, and win whatever prize they ask. Most of them are never seen again. But in private, Zoraida hides a persona that's entirely different. She's centuries old, and though she's not truly Neverborn, she came to Malifaux long before the first breach opened, and over time, she's become Neverborn. She knows much about the weaving of fate, and she intertwines her own designs with the cosmic will, manipulating people and events slowly to achieve her desired result. To Zoraida, it's an art form, even if only she can appreciate it. Zoraida shows up in Sommer's territory and tells him that she's called a meeting with all the gremlin leaders. Several of the young gremlins treat her like a celebrity and are eager to help. As the other gremlin leaders arrive, they all fight with each other and they almost come to blows before Zoraida calls their attention. She announces that things are changing and war is coming, but that none of them are ready for it. When one of the gremlins in the audience interrupts, telling her that they are good fighters, Zoraida tries to explain that each of them is like a finger, useless by itself, but what they need to do is come together into a fist. When they all look at her dumbfounded, she clarifies that what she's saying is they need to unite. Sommer yells out that he won't unite with Ophelia, and Zoraida responds that if that's true, then they're all dead. Sommer shoots back that that's according to her, and Zoraida goes quiet as the sky darkens and clouds form overhead. She calls out, her voice artificially amplified, and tells Sommer not to test her, and then threatens to crush all of his bones into dust. Sommer is about to reply, but thinks better of it, and everyone in the crowd is surprised to see him quieted. Zoraida calms down, and the clouds clear, and she then explains that they all have two choices. They can either go out alone, fighting by themselves and dying, or they can choose to make a pact and work together to crush their enemies. Sommer gives her a sullen look, and then agrees. Ulix wakes up one morning to find that one of his pigs gave birth to a golden piglet. The night before, the mother had escaped, and he had found her rummaging around in a cellar that belonged to Zoraida. Considering what could have happened, he figured this probably wasn't a bad outcome, and named the pig Honey. She became popular in the Bayou, and people came from all over to see her, including Zoraida herself. She marvels at the piglet, and seems to even forget about the incident with her cellar. She tells Ulix that he's got something special here, but that it'll take a lot to keep her, and Ulix tells her about his plan to protect her, and she cackles with laughter. Some rogue arcanists plant a bomb in the sewers of Malifaux, underneath the Governor General's mansion, where he's hosting a Halloween party. Unbeknownst to the guests, the party is actually an elaborate ceremony that will allow the Governor General to bind the attendees to his will. Ramos, not being ready to destabilize the guild, secretly tips off Lucius about the bomb, and the secretary sends Hoffman to disable it. When Hoffman finds the bomb, he struggles with its mechanism and isn't able to disable it, but when the timer runs down, it does not explode. The Governor General completes his plan, and far off in the bayou, the effigies scurry up to Zoraida and deliver her small mechanical parts, pieces from the bomb. Zoraida thinks about how she knew about the conspiracy, and the conspiracy to counter the conspiracy, and it was clear to her which she should let continue. She admires the ambition of the Governor General, and wonders if the attendees of the party knew that their dance steps were precisely choreographed to perform a ritual to bind themselves to the Governor General. A bold plan, but one that he wouldn't have been able to accomplish without significant help. When Lewis came to challenge Zoraida to a game of cards to get himself out of his gambling debt, she knew he was going to lose. Fate was never fair. After the game, Zoraida decided that the man was foolish but not cruel, so she offers him a shot of moonshine and to play a second hand. He begs her to give him what he wants, but she insists on playing, and as she deals, the drugs in the moonshine start to take effect, and the man starts to fall asleep. As he goes out, he tells her to have pity, as they say she was human once. He drops his cards on the table, and Zoraida gets a look. The Midnight Garden, the Soulstone, the Path of Destiny. The cards were aimed at her, not him. She gets angry and wipes the table. How could fate toy with her like that? As she calms down, she looks at the man and gets ready to practice her new magic with him. When Lilith arrives at Zoraida's hut, she's surprised to see Zoraida slumped over the table and a human man standing over her. He greets her and turns his back on her, and Lilith is filled with rage. She impales the man on her sword, and he responds by saying, "It's me," as his blood spills out on the floor. Zoraida suddenly jerks up and snags something off the man, and then tells Lilith if she had done that when they first met, they would be in quite the pickle now. Lilith replies that she was much more forgiving in those days. Soon Pandora enters and asks if they are cursing someone, and if she can choose to give them boils. Lilith gets right down to business and says Zoraida already explained to her what they're doing, so she'll summarize to save time. There's a new breach opening tonight, and it will connect two places within Malifaux. Both ends can be moved, and one will appear in the guild headquarters. They will seize it and be able to travel anywhere they want with ease. Pandora asks what they can do about it, and Zoraida tells her that she put a focus in the guild that will send them there, but only their souls, not their bodies. They will take whatever bodies are closest to the focus. Zoraida finishes the spell. She had lied to the woman about what they were doing, and she needed to stop lying. She tells them to brace themselves, as they will be among their enemies soon, and they need to practice restraint. She adds that this won't hurt a bit. She really needed to stop lying. Zoraida finds herself in an office building behind a desk. A man is on his way out of the room, and she turns to the other employee, Pandora. They acknowledge each other and then look around for Lilith. Zoraida collects the focus, a small cloth doll, and Pandora asks why Lilith didn't appear in the man who left. She looks on the desk and sees a Venus flytrap, and then asks Zoraida if the spell didn't specify humans. Zoraida pauses and says it should have, but she isn't sure. As they try to decide what to do, they go to leave the room and almost bump into a man. Pandora yells out that it's Lilith. She can tell by her aura. They ask where she was, and she explains that she was on the other side of a nearby wall. She asks why Pandora is holding a plant in a pot, and Pandora tells her never mind. They ask Zoraida about the breach, and she says they don't have long. She instructs Lilith to stuff a scarf into a pipe and then tamper with a boiler. Then she is to go outside and give her gun and a note to the first man she sees, and tell him if he does something for her, he will get to keep his job. Lilith is about to object, but Zoraida leaves. Zoraida was in a young new body, but could still see the threads of fate. She goes into the kitchen and puts the focus on a service tray, and then rolls a pepper mill across the floor. As she leaves, she hears a crash and a tray hitting the ground, followed by a voice ordering a server to take the tray by the door instead. Zoraida rushes back into the office and tells the women they have to leave. She leads them to the corner with the boiler that is now making strange noises. Lilith says there are no doors here and asks how they're going to leave, and Zoraida replies that it's a magic boiler. Lilith tells her it's not magic, and if she didn't know better, she thinks it's about to explode. Suddenly, the room dissolves. Zoraida blinks twice, and she's back in her hut. Lilith shouts that she should have warned them, and Pandora asks if they just died. Zoraida explains that those people were not important enough to get access to where they needed. She tells them to get ready, as they're about to go back. Zoraida finds herself standing over a tray, and she picks up the focus that she had hidden in it earlier. She looks to her left to see a man wielding a stamp dangerously. Lilith. The woman to her right waves at her. Pandora. In front of her is a man who she recognizes as Blind Jack, and she asks him why he is there. The man looks nervous and says he doesn't know what she means, but Zoraida tells him to take a closer look. As he does, he recognizes them, and then says that he's sorry. Zoraida could see through the illusion he looked human, but was actually a Neverborn. She asks why he's sorry, and what he's doing there, and the man tries to explain as Lilith pulls a Neverborn relic out of the bag at his feet. Zoraida demands to know if he is selling them, and he explains that times are hard and he needs money to afford living in the city. Lilith seethes, as he explains to Zoraida that it was just a few of them, and the guild pay well for native trinkets. Lilith then stops and is about to explode, until Zoraida reminds her of where they are. She notices the stamp in Lilith's hand has started to elongate and turn into metal. She was afraid of that. It seems their spirits were too strong, and their real forms are starting to manifest. She tells Blind Jack to go, and asks Lilith to calm down, as she'll have a chance to settle this later. She tells the women that they need to get into storage room B27, but that it will set off alarms. They are to go draw as much attention away from there as possible, without getting caught. Pandora laughs and says sarcastically that she wants Lilith to be subtle, adding that she would have been better off bringing Nightmare along. Zoraida goes off and finds a mechanical puzzle cube among the trinkets waiting to be cataloged by the witch hunters. She hides the focus inside the cube, and then goes to find Sonia Crid. When she finds the woman, she stops short when she sees who she's speaking to. Zoraida greets Miss Crid, Miss Ortega, and Miss Justice. She hands Crid the box and a piece of paper and tells her that it set off the thaumatograph. Nothing major, but it should be stored in a safe place for now. Crid agrees and signs the paper, but adds that the power to storage on C basement was damaged by the boiler explosion this morning. This should go to B27 until the power is back. Zoraida agrees. She tracks the other two women and finds them in a room that's full of dead bodies. She scolds them that this is not exactly subtle, and then tells them that they need to go, and that she's particularly fond of this departure. There's a knock on the door, and she answers it to find a man holding a box and a note. He tells her that he was told to deliver it here, and he would be able to keep his job. She opens the box and takes out a pistol, and then kicks the door open. As the man sees the pile of bodies, she shoots Lilith, then Pandora, and then smiles at the man and shoots herself. Back at the hut, Zoraida tells the women that when they appear in their new bodies again, they are to immediately draw their weapons and shoot any of the other guild personnel who do not do the same. She appears in the body of a guild guard in a hallway with 5 other guards, and then shoots one as 2 others get shot as well. They open a nearby door to see a portal, and Zoraida knows that it's time for her to be tested. She walks through the portal into a field with a farmhouse on the other end. The other 2 women don't follow, and she tells them that she needs them both, as what she's about to do isn't going to be easy. Lilith says that isn't Malifaux, and Pandora tells her that she lied to them. Zoraida says that she did about some things, but that they shouldn't be surprised. They ask where it is, and she says a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, but at the center of all things. They relent, and Zoraida tells them that soon a woman would come out of the house, a woman who is selfish and greedy, and alone in the world. She would find something wonderful that would change her life and send her to a far-off place. She will find it as if it was left specifically for her. She tears the focus, and takes a soul stone out from inside of it, and tells them that this is it. Lilith says that the breach was no ordinary breach, and asks where they are. Zoraida tells her that the correct question is when. She starts explaining to the women, but the words are really for her to hear. She tells them that if this doesn't happen, then they will all never meet. Their plans at Kythera will never have happened. The grave spirit will be unleashed, and everything that has happened since then will be undone. The threads of fate sometimes wind backwards, and there's no one else who can do this. What should happen, must. The women agree and tell her she must do it, as the stakes are too high. She heads to a small patch of dirt and puts down the soulstone. She turns and walks away, but then decides to look back, and in an upstairs window, she sees a girl, Emily. The girl is moving her hands in a familiar motion, and Zoraida realizes that she's casting a spell. The girl had the talent too, and hid it all those years. Zoraida knew the others in the house wouldn't understand. They had already banished one witch. They would find her out too and cast her out. How would a girl so young survive in a place like this? She had always told herself that Emily would be better off alone, but that was a self-serving lie. She had really been abandoned to a terrible fate. Zoraida could condemn herself to any suffering, but she could not leave Emily to that fate. She takes a step back towards the soulstone, as Lilith tells her she can't change this, and grabs her shoulder. Zoraida says just this once, she'll tell fate no. Pandora tells her they have to go, and Zoraida knows there isn't time to explain to them. She has to make them. She pushes Lilith away and sets Pandora ablaze with witchfire. She then runs for the stone, but roots shoot up and grab her. Lilith manifests her greatsword, and Zoraida knows the spell won't last much longer. She feels Pandora playing with her mind. It's only a distraction, unless the woman manages to manifest her box. Lilith goes to swing her sword, but Zoraida uses magic to confuse her, and she attacks Pandora instead. Zoraida turns into a raven and flies towards the soulstone. Pandora opens her box, but she's able to grab the soulstone anyway, and flies up in the air. She sees the women running back towards the breach, as a woman runs out of the house, and stops at the patch of dirt. There's no soulstone. Zoraida sees the threads of fate unraveling. She sees Emily get rescued, a new life by a lake, children splashing, a cup of wine. She's happy, deliriously happy. Delirium. Pandora had opened her box. The illusion fades, and she's once again flying towards the soulstone, claws outstretched. Blades of misery tear at her, and she crashes into the ground, returning to her usual shape. She reaches for the stone, but Lilith stabs her through her back, and she then feels hands carrying her towards the breach. She sees the woman run out of the house, and stop, looking at the soulstone. She tries to call out, but can't. As they land on the floor in the storage room, the breach collapses and obliterates everything around it. They find themselves in the hut again, and Lilith tells her that she was foolish, but it was a hard thing that she did, and she bears her no ill will. Zoraida tells the woman she understands nothing, and tells them to get out. Pandora asks her what she saw when she was momentarily taken by the box, and Zoraida asks if it was only a minute. Pandora tells her it was a heartbeat, and Zoraida says it was nothing of consequence. Lilith says that they were Zoraida's backup plan. She asked them to come along because they were the only ones who could force her to go through with it if she wasn't strong enough. Her schemes have gotten so good, she can beat herself. Zoraida spits on the floor and tells them to go. As they walk out, Pandora says fate chose well when it picked her. Sommer meets Zoraida and Ophelia in the bayou against his better judgment. The women make a joke that goes over his head, and he gets impatient. Zoraida explains that big wheels are turning, and if they all aren't careful, they'll be left behind. Sommer is confused, and she asks him if he remembers the war she said was coming, and explains that the people in Malifaux are preparing for it. She says that she's aware of some of the things that are going on, but she's more worried about the things that have slipped past her. She tells him she wants him to figure out what she missed and where it's hidden. Sommer tries to think about where in the conversation he lost the thread, and asks Zoraida who is hiding what. Ophelia responds, the Miners and Steamfitters Union. Sommer asks if he's going to fight someone, and Zoraida asks him if he can hold his liquor as well as she has heard. He confirms proudly, and Zoraida comments that men tend to shoot their mouths off when they've been drinking. Seeing where this is going, Sommer objects, explaining that gremlins and big folks don't associate together. Ophelia agrees, but asks him if he's ever heard of a game called Bullet. Sommer replies that he has, and he's actually quite good at it. They stand in silence for several seconds before Sommer catches up, and Zoraida confirms that there's a game of Bullet being organized in the quarantine zone. She tells him that he'll be going in to get info not from an Arcanist, but from a freelance operative who brought something through the breach for the Arcanist and hid it. She hands him a big bag of coin to buy his way into the game. Suddenly, Sommer has a realization and points out that he can't play without a second, and neither of them look cut out to play a drinking game. Zoraida says that it's lucky that she already found him a second, as Brewmaster approaches from out of the bayou. Sommer bows to him, and Ophelia curtsies, while Zoraida merely nods. Brewmaster asks Sommer how his brewing is going, and Sommer produces a flask, offering it to Brewmaster. He takes a sip and compliments him on the flavor, and then takes out his own creation, and offers it to Sommer, who takes a sip and tells him that it's beautiful. Ophelia asks if they need some time alone, and Sommer yells back at her not to give him any of her sass. Zoraida tells Brewmaster that they were talking about how he'll be the second in a game of Bullet, and Sommer says that he's not worthy of the honor. Brewmaster scolds Sommer, telling him to stow it, and explains that he should be given his title and his proper respect, but that he won't tolerate any brown-nosing. Zoraida informs them that their target is a man named Von Schill, who runs a mercenary group called the Free Corps. As the Governor General performs his ritual to ascend, Zoraida is in the bayou finalizing her preparations. She had been getting ready for this ever since her omens had told her the fire was coming. She prepared magical protection in various ways, including by putting a portrait of the Governor General in the fork of a tree and covering it with magical symbols. It would act as a lightning rod, carrying the energy down, and leaving Zoraida to be the only one holding a fistful of lightning. Soon, the picture starts glowing, and then bursts into flames, and a huge surge of energy leaps from her broken trap and roars at her. She throws up her hands in fear, and nearby, the mysterious effigy watches as its mother realizes she's about to die. Zoraida gasps and opens her eyes and realizes that she's still standing in the same place. The bayou is calm, and Zoraida realizes that she's still very frightened. Suddenly, she senses something behind her and turns around to see the mysterious emissary. It looks at her for a moment and then walks off into the bayou. When the Governor General had tried to ascend, the attempt went catastrophically wrong and caused an unexpected surge of etheric energy. The effigies that Zoraida had created years earlier acted as grounding points for the energy, harnessing it and containing it, and at that moment, Zoraida lost her grasp on fate. With Titania's return, and the Burning Man on Earth, Zoraida realizes that she has to focus her attention on one thing at a time. She'll leave Titania to Lilith, and the Burning Man to the people of Earth. Her priority would be the barrier between worlds. She had once used Jackdaw as a mystical wedge to seal away the ether, and now it was time to do it again. She could find the right person, and trick them into accepting the bargain. The only question was whether she would find one in time. Zoraida, in her crow form, watches in secret as Nekima discusses plans with Titania to join forces and move against Lilith. She flies to the shore, where she finds Lilith standing over the dead bodies of fish-like creatures from the sea. She transforms and chastises Lilith, as she was supposed to be recruiting these creatures to their cause and not killing them. Zoraida spills the blood of one of the creatures and tries to read the stain's meaning as she tells Lilith that Nekima and Titania are about to move against her. Lilith is not surprised, and Zoraida explains that they must have gotten wind of her attempts to recruit these creatures, and Nekima sought out help from Titania in response. The two women head back to Zoraida's hut and discuss how they expect Nekima to advance and what they can do to counter her approach. Zoraida points out that Pandora should be there soon, as they are interrupted by a knock on the door. Zoraida answers and finds a small boy, the Dreamer. He tells her that he heard they were going to fight Titania and that he wants in. Zoraida is confused, as she has read the signs, and they told her Pandora was coming. She looks around for the woman but does not find her, and the Dreamer pushes past her and enters the hut. Lilith says that she will not work with the Dreamer, as he is as likely to turn on them in the middle of the battle as he is to actually help them. Zoraida retrieves a puppet that is wearing a nightgown, and then asks the Dreamer why he looks like this, and what he's up to. The Dreamer responds that this is what he looks like now, as he's all grown up, and Lilith threatens him, but then the two women feel a presence in the room, larger and more dangerous than the child. Zoraida asks him why he would want to fight Titania, and the Dreamer responds that Chompy told him that she was mean and stupid, and that she was strict, always trying to boss other people around. Lilith is about to object, but Zoraida interrupts her, and points out that fate has delivered them this boy, instead of Pandora, and that they should accept his help. She's confused, but she goes on to point out that Nightmare will be a powerful ally against Nekima. Lilith agrees reluctantly, and then tells Dreamer that he will be under her command, and that if he tries to betray them, then she will make him regret it. He agrees, and then looks at Zoraida, and tells her that he's not going to be playing dolls with no girls. Zoraida slaps him on the back of the head, and tells him to mind his elders. Hours later, the three people leave the hut, and Zoraida asks the Dreamer if he remembers their plan to ambush Nekima. He responds impatiently that they've gone over the plan 100 times, but Lilith starts explaining again anyway. Having lost his patience, the Dreamer causes himself to disappear. Lilith asks Zoraida if they can trust the child, and Zoraida throws a handful of knucklebones down on the ground and tries to read their meaning. After staring for a while, Lilith interrupts and asks Zoraida why she seemed distracted since the boy arrived. Zoraida responds that her readings have been strange but favorable, and they agree to meet for the battle, and then depart. Nekima makes an early surprise attack on Lilith's domain, and Zoraida shows up to the battle late. As she approaches, she sees Nightmare rampaging around the battlefield and plowing through Nephilim. She moves into a secluded area and transforms back into her human form, and is astonished that she didn't see any of this in her visions. As she watches the carnage, she notices another figure off in the trees, and recognizes them as Titania. The Fae Queen is holding a heart with 3 nails in it, and Zoraida recognizes the spell, which is used to create false images of the future. A spell which Zoraida thought only she knew. Titania looks at her and smiles, and then walks away. Just then, Zoraida hears Lilith scream, and she charges into the battlefield. She sees Nekima standing over Lilith, getting ready to finish her off, and she shoots a hex at her, causing her to temporarily go blind. Nekima yells for Zoraida to stay out of this, as she swings her sword wildly. Zoraida calls out for Nightmare, and the large beast rushes his way across the battlefield, and plows into Nekima. Being blind and incapable of fighting, the woman flies away, with Nightmare in hot pursuit. Zoraida approaches Lilith, and Dreamer appears, and they both see the large wound in her chest. Zoraida tells Dreamer to bring them back to the hut, and he moves the three of them through the realm of nightmares. Zoraida immediately tells Dreamer to fetch some soulstones out of the cupboard, but he returns with none, and says they are missing. Zoraida assumes this is Titania's doing, and tries fruitlessly to patch up Lilith's body. Dreamer asks if she's going to die, and Zoraida gets angry, but then an idea occurs to her, and she tells the boy that she knows how to save her. She has him transport them to Nythera, the tomb that imprisoned Titania for centuries, and Nightmare carries Lilith's body to the open chasm. Lilith regains consciousness and tries to resist when she realizes what they're doing, but Nightmare holds her in his grip. She tells Zoraida that she doesn't want to be like Titania, and Zoraida explains that Nythera kept Titania alive, and that it'll do the same for her, and that all of her visions of the future, where they prevail against the tyrants, require Lilith to survive. Nightmare drops Lilith into the tomb, and then Zoraida speaks the words to seal it. When the Gremlins start to hear rumors that the new Governor General is mobilizing the guild against the Bayou, all of the Gremlin families gather at a meeting. The leaders of the families start bickering over how to handle the situation, before Zoraida calls their attention, and then announces that Sommer has something to say. He addresses the crowd, and explains that the rumors are true, and that the new Governor General and the guild is coming for them. He says that they want them all dead, and that now is the time for the families to unite, so that they can stand against the humans. Zoraida is pleased and goes to address the crowd, but Sommer clears his throat loudly, and she asks if there was something he wanted to add. Sommer takes a second to muster his courage, and then tells Zoraida that he appreciates what she's trying to do, but that this is a gremlin issue, and she is not a gremlin. Zoraida is about to respond, but someone in the crowd yells out in support of Sommer, and soon the whole crowd is chanting his name. Zoraida looks around angrily, but realizes the odds are against her, and decides to walk off without making a scene. Ever since Zoraida learned about the tyrants, she's been determined to prevent their return. She puts her plans in motion, weaving her intention into fate's threads, the reopening of the breach, the presence of humanity in Malifaux, all her design to ensure the tyrants fall. But Titania's return has disrupted her plans. The Autumn Queen can shape fate as well, and Zoraida is unsure as they have similar goals, but she doesn't know what Titania will try to accomplish once they vanquish the tyrants. As Zoraida's allies fall and her plans crumble, the time has come for her to take a more direct approach. She will remind everyone, one by one, why you never gamble with the Swamp Hag. As Lucius is on his way to the northern hills to investigate a disturbance, he breaks away from his group at night to meet with Zoraida. She asks him if he got her message, as a mire golem rises up behind her in a threatening manner. She tells it to settle down, and then asks if he's ready to play a game. Lucius asks her what the stakes are, and she says if he wins, she will tell him where to find what he's looking for. If she wins, she wants to know exactly what he is. He says he would rather keep her guessing, and makes a counteroffer that she just tell him what he wants. She asks why she would do that, and he says that he has something that will benefit all of the Neverborn. He will eliminate the rogue element. Zoraida thinks, and Lucius pushes by asking if she thinks she can rely on it in the upcoming conflict. He knew he had won. Zoraida says they have a deal, and they shake hands. They play a quick game of cards, and Zoraida wins, and she tells him that she knows he isn't a Nephilim because he's too slippery with his words. Lucius simply tilts his head, and she continues, saying that he's no skinwalker, and she knows a doppelganger when she sees one. Lucius thinks to himself that if she even considered that, then she was further away from the truth than he thought. She tells him he blends in with the humans well, but lacks that fresh skin smell, and then asks why he wears the mask and gloves. He says that it's a requirement of his profession, and he asks her for her guess. She pauses, and then guesses that he is a woe. Lucius tells her that he is as much woe as he is sorrow, and that that's as much as he will tell her. She tells him that he's impossible, and he asks her about the issue at the settlements near Ridley. She tells him that he will find what he's looking for, near a settlement called 32J, and to make sure to take care of it properly. She hands him a small music box and tells him to use it, and he thanks her. She says she will find out what he is one day, and he replies, perhaps, and maybe she will live long enough to see him fulfill his destiny. Zoraida prepares her hut to perform a ritual by drawing symbols on the floor with chalk. There's a knock on the door, and one of her voodoo dolls answers it, letting Jedza and Mikhail inside. Jedza asks Zoraida if she missed her, and Zoraida shoots back that she misses her clean floor. Jedza says that's no way to greet an old friend, and Zoraida replies that she's definitely old, and she makes Mikhail look like he was born yesterday. Both women laugh and then embrace. They then sit down, leaving no place at the table for Mikhail. Jedza explains that Gretchen from the Malifaux Explorer Society has called in her favor, but that Jedza doesn't like the mission she's being sent on, and she thinks it's a bad idea to go stirring up the past. Zoraida asks why Jedza is here, and she responds by explaining that she needs a thread made. Zoraida looks concerned, but Jedza explains that there's no other way. The Swamp Hag cautions that there will be a cost, and then asks if that's why Jedza has let Mikhail come inside this time. But Jedza responds that they've brought their own, to Zoraida's surprise, as she didn't think they had it in them. Jedza explains that it's someone who will not be missed, and asks if Zoraida will do it for her. And Zoraida responds that she knows where Jedza's going, and she has a question that she wants her to ask and report right back. If she'll do that, Zoraida will make her the thread. Jedza agrees, and Mikhail brings a bag inside with a body in it. Zoraida unwraps it and looks at the person, and exclaims that they were right, as this person will definitely not be missed. Jedza and Mikhail walk outside, and they can hear screaming and crunching as Zoraida starts her work. Zoraida burst out in maniacal laughter when the Burning Man appeared in Malifaux. She hadn't seen that coming, but ever since Titania's return, her mastery of fate has been much more tenuous. With the Burning Man's arrival, decades or centuries of work unraveled before her eyes. She can't tend to fate with so many players on the board, so she's turned her attention to old magic. Her cauldron bubbles, and hexes pull swamp creatures to her side. The upheaval in Malifaux was almost a relief. Zoraida had spent so long painstakingly manipulating fate that she's almost lost without the task to occupy her mind. And that's it for Zoraida. That was a long one. It's really interesting to see how she's changed over the course of the 3 editions. It's also kind of cool how early on, most of her premonitions tended to come true, but now we see that that's waning. The only major thing that she predicted that hasn't come true yet is that Leveticus is going to be super important to the events of the world. I'm curious if they'll ever pay that little thread off. It's also going to be interesting to see how Zoraida interacts with Titania going forward, as they seem to now be the 2 leaders of the different factions within Neverborn. And I wonder if she's going to maybe team up with Castor to help bring Lilith back. But I guess we'll find out soon because that new book's coming out in a couple weeks. But anyway, drop a comment below and let me know what's your favorite Zoraida story. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Check out the Discord if you want to hang out with the rest of the lore nerds, and consider pledging to the Patreon. You can pitch in $2 a month to help keep the channel going, and I'd really appreciate it. Huge shout outs to the extremely cool kids tier on Patreon, Steam Powered Scoundrels, and Dogmatize, and thanks for watching.